Bring a drink of water, Leroy. Bring a drink of water. No. If I could get to the Mercy Man, he'd give me some, I know. I got a gallon.
Hi there, all the fans and viewers and watchers of our Film Gamer channel, which is about video games, movies, the songs, musics, and travelings also, and also some interviews in our interview series. Sometimes in Hungarian, sometimes in English. Now again, a foreign interview will come, and I really glad to can be announced a really great writer who writes video games, sometimes I think other else's, Kurt McClung, sorry, I pronounced it well.
Yeah, you did.
Okay. Hi, and thank you for the participation. And you are now living in France, so I hope you have a great day. Also, it's here because more sunny now than general sometimes here.
It's a beautiful day.
Yes. And the first question is about your career, how you beginning it, and of course that why you choose this profession, and how you managed to make it you go to a higher level. You managed to move some high schools or university or some profession. How did you do that, and what's the advices for the newcomers from you?
Well, I'd say, I guess, being the first time I actually called myself a writer was probably only about 20 years ago. And when I went to school, I liked writing. I liked playing role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, and other games. And and I'd write a lot of letters as well. I used to like writing letters by hand, and I was involved in theater quite a bit. But I come from a small town in Indiana, and my high school counselors, they pretty much told me, don't do anything literary or artistic if you want a job. And since I had good math scores and science scores, they advised that I should become an engineer. So I actually went to study engineering in Indiana at Purdue University in Lafayette, Indiana. It's a good school. It's a school where astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Gus Grissom went to school. It was a big school. I didn't like it very much. In fact, to finish my Bachelor's of Science, my engineering degree, it took me almost 7 years to finish it because I kept taking breaks. I went to work on Nantucket Island and we had a place there, and I worked in restaurants. I went to France for 2 years, and I taught English to professionals. I did everything basically I could. I studied theater, I studied dance, I studied anything I could not to be an engineer. But finally, after I finally got the engineering degree, and I didn't want to stay in America, so I took an opportunity to go work as an engineer in France. And my first job was on the Euro Disneyland project. I was a a database scheduling simulations engineer. So basically that means you help simulate projects and the scheduling, big, huge projects, to see if how to plan them out. And then I was kind of bored with that as well. I ended up doing that for 10 years altogether as a consultant. But already my first years into my job, I started up my own company, and it was a play-by-mail company where I was translating English games into French to play these games where you would be 1,000 people in the same world, an open world. But we didn't have internet back then. We only had mail. So you would send your orders in by mail, and we would type them into a computer, and then we would print off your activities. There's a game called Quest. It was like you had like a group of 10 or 15 adventurers, and you would, just like in Heroes of Might and Magic or something like that, you would give your orders, and then we would send them in for a week, and we would send back 5 pages printed with a map and what you've done and all that. And that was something I was always doing on the side. So I was working as an engineer, and on the side I was a publisher, creative director, doing paper-top games and play-by-mail games. I did a role-playing game, a couple war games. That was all on the side. And so I guess in terms of education, what I really recommend is, as soon as you know what your passion is, go after it. I did the engineering because it was almost I think if I had it to do over again, I would have done a humanities degree of some kind, either history or anthropology or sociology.
Yeah.
But
It's a
I
more
had a
human
yeah,
side.
it's more in line with what I do today because I'm an autodidact and everything else, including writing actually.
Mhm.
But then at one point in time, I think what happened. One of my companies, I started up this choose your own ending book company in France with some friends,
Mhm.
and we sold that company to Humano, which is Humanoids is a big comic book publisher in France. But there's like Media Erlance. It's with Mobius and Jodorowsky. So it was this big comic book company. They bought my company out, and then I was working there, and I started writing comic books
Uh-huh.
on the side. So this is all these side companies eventually turned into a company where I could quit my engineering job and become a publisher running my own business. And then finally, once I got bought out by Humano, they pretty much said, you're a better writer than a businessman. So why
Huh.
don't you just write for us? And that's when I started writing my first comic book series, Dragon Seed, with them, and some short stories for Metal Relance, heavy metal, the French version of heavy
Oh.
metal.
Huh. Uh-huh.
And I wrote for them. I really liked it. I really enjoyed writing. And that's when a friend of mine who I'd worked with before, Erwin Le Breton, called me and said, "Hey, I've just started working on this new video game, Might and Magic, that we got from America, and we're rewriting the world and we're rewriting on it. Would you like to come write with us?" And I was like, "No way! I'm not going to betray. I'm not going to betray writing in role play games." And I asked him, "What game is it?" And he said, "Well, it's Heroes of Might and Magic." And I go, "Oh, I'll make an exception for Heroes of Might and Magic because it was
You knew it before? You knew the series? Or?
Yeah, it was by far my favorite
Oh, I see.
series. Yeah, I think I played it. I played it a lot when my son was born. When he was like 6 months or a year old, I think Heroes 4. I played it to death pretty much. Heroes 3 I had played, and Heroes 2. I'm one of the few people that really liked Heroes 4.
Yeah, I like to. With the story, the campaign is really great. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I really thought it had a great emergent storytelling.
The RPG side of a few.
Yeah, I loved everything, and so I played a lot that. And even though I played 3, 3 was much better balanced game, I think, but 4 was just so many stories you could tell in your head while you were playing the game. And so that's when, at that point in time, I left. I studied as an engineer. I went to work for engineering for 10 years or so, but created companies on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually one of my companies got bought out, and I was able to quit engineering and go full-time as a creative director, publisher, I guess. And then I went full-time as a writer when I pretty much danced over from Ubisoft into Ubisoft's world.
In 2005, yeah? I think. In 2005, yeah?
Yeah, 2005. It would have been 15 years ago that I went full-time. And then the 5 years before that, the 10 years before that, I'd been writing a lot of games and things.
Oh, I see. So you had experiences before that also?
Well, the first video game I did was for a friend of, it was for Hip Hop Interactive, and it was an adaptation of The Mummy. The movie, The Mummy.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun.
I didn't know about it. And it released?
It released, yeah, it released. I was the guy doing the English language cutscenes.
I see.
So it gave me an excuse to watch the movies, and it was really fun to write the lines, and it got approved by Warner.
It's an adventure game or something like that, or adventure?
It was a game for, I'm trying to guess, it must have been a console at the time, like PlayStation 1 or something, like way back.
Mm-hmm.
I bet it was PlayStation 1, the first PlayStation.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it was, and that was fun. I'm not even sure. That was my first game I did, but I did that like as a freelancer, because I've never really been a full-time video game writer. I've always written other stuff. So I also.
So it was a new possibility and the new side of the writing.
I didn't think I would enjoy it that much. I think at first it was challenging. Actually, I never really considered myself a writer because I didn't have a writing degree. I consider myself more a publisher, or an engineer, or a creative director. Right, I was directing other talent, and I was working in France, and everything here is done in French at first.
Tarantino hasn't got a degree also as well, so he is not a director in that way.
I'm not French. I'm really American. Even though I speak French really well. I've lived here for a long time, but so what I ended up doing was I guess the thing is, it was when Humanos bought me, they really liked the stories I was putting up, the concepts, and they go, "Why don't you try writing a comic book?" and I wrote some short stories, and I wrote some concepts, and then I got a series published, and that's when I was a writer. I think this would have been about 20 years ago. That's when I felt like I was no longer just a creative director. It's really hard to be a creative director, but I was more or a world designer. Because I was
But also you
designing
need some creativity and word design maybe for writing, because sometimes you write for a new word. Some creativity and designing maybe is good as well, no? If you have some side of it.
Yeah, I think that it all comes together. Actually, in video games, there were never really world designers and narrative designers before. They were just writers, right? We were all writing, and so you had to do everything. You'd have to create. Sometimes you have to create a world for the people. They might have had drawings or pictures, or whatever, but they didn't really have a background to the world, or
I see. Yes.
The world didn't have a reason, and so I became a specialist in designing worlds, fantasy worlds in particular, but even pirate worlds or other worlds. So people would call me in to set up the foundations of what they say today, intellectual property, the IP, or the franchise, whatever. So I became really good. I came really good at that only because I did it a lot. I mean, I did it for a lot of companies and helped them structure. I like working with other writers too, so that's always been easy. I mean, I think while I was working for Might and Magic, so when I was working with Might and Magic, I was never a full-time employee of Ubisoft. I was a freelancer.
I see.
And so I worked on a little bit on Might and Magic Heroes 5, and then I worked on 6, and then it was near Shades of Darkness that I became the lead writer of the franchise, and then I became lead writer of the Heroes game, and then I became the lead writer of the franchise of all Might and Magic games the year after that. So it was like, so then it was like working on all kinds of. I bet I worked on 15 Might and Magic games because I really liked the universe, and we'd build it together with a bunch of us. There's like a lot of writers working on it. So that was something I worked with Erwan and Julian and Jeff Spock back in the day, and there was Erwan Lobaton, of course.
And you worked the concept also for Ashan? You free or how?
Yeah, there was actually Richard Dansky and Erwan were the first to start saying they wanted to put something else together, and then Jeff came on, I think, and he started working with the RPG game they did on the Might and Magic world, and then went into Heroes, and then I came in Heroes 5, the second add-on. I worked on the first add-on. I didn't work on the first game. I worked on the first add-on a little bit. And then in Tribes of the East, I was a full-time writer for that period.
Paul, the composer, liked the most that game, liked the most because he really liked the mood of it, that he can make some music from Armenia or something like that, so Armenian music or something like that. So he really liked it.
There was something we had I think what was fun about. Especially about the 5 and even the beginning of 6, and then 6 became. I mean, Might and Magic was still a major IP at Ubisoft, so we had kind of free reign and we had decent budgets to work really well on it. And there was.
And you worked on the early version of Hero 6, first and I will beginning to develop it.
Yes, I was.
And it was a little bit not similar to the exact one, or it's a really.
It was complicated because I don't think we really knew. I'm not really sure what happened between Nival and it's just that there was a lot of trouble aligning between what their priorities were and what Ubisoft's priorities were.
I see.
They were doing another game back then that had most of their A-list developers on it.
Yeah, A-list Online or something like that,
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're ready to move on from the IP. They didn't need it anymore to develop their studio.
I saw some pictures that it almost similar to Heroes 4, the way of the camera of the map,
There were some great ideas. We were all real disappointed because we worked really hard and trying to go forward. But then I think when we went to the black hole, that it became clearer that they actually were going to be more invested and wanted to make a better, make a game, And I think that's. And then it's always complicated, though.
Of course.
What becomes complicated is and I'm a huge fan of turn-based strategy, especially fantasy turn-based military strategy like that. And to be honest, I think there was a big problem with well, to go back to your first question, so I don't get too lost in the conversation, but for me, the writing was, and this is I think what video games separates the fact that I had an engineering education and I was very logical and I treated stories like they were buildings being constructed.
It seems a long way from mathematics to the writing.
Yeah, but it's actually what's interesting is if you're a writer, if you have writers have left brains and right brains. You have there's something that's a good writer understands how to portray the emotions of his characters and is usually very observant, kind of like a comedian or an actor or something. You observe life and you can make people feel real and the characters feel real and put them in dramatic, magical situations and have a decent, use your imagination and all that. But there's also something that I was a stickler for, and one of the reasons we put so much energy in Might and Magic was we felt it really needed a coherent universe that that people could invest in and go, this is I get it, So there's a logical side too when you're writing a fantasy world in particular, where any mathematical science, let's just say even accounting, I don't know, anything where you could put together
every puzzle must fit well, yeah.
Yeah, when you draw it out. I do as many schematics when I draw a world as I do, I think, actual writing. I draw a bunch of pictures and lines, and I say, okay, in Might and Magic, we had 10 factions fighting against each other.
Yes.
No one really knew, and I had all that mapped out with all the implications.
Well, not 9, 10, not 9.
There was the dragon. Well, there's 9 that you see in the game, and the 10th one for me were the Dragon Knights, but we never actually got to develop them. So they were part of it as well. I should show you guys sometimes all these different things, but we always had to have something ready for the next iteration. But to be honest, we had to make it simple. We had the dragon gods, and we had the pantheon and all that. But what we were really looking for was
the base of what the base meant.
Yeah, we had to make sure that you could always have someone to fight, even within your own faction. And that was fascinating because if you take Magic, and let's just say there were 9, that you can have the 9 factions that everybody knows because they've been published. But you have the 9 factions. Not only in a typical Might and Magic Heroes game, we had to justify the fact that not only the necromancers could fight against Haven, the knights.
Sometimes civil war happened.
Yeah, it wasn't enough civil war. You had to have knights fighting knights, and you had to have necromancers fighting necromancers. So we ended up having to really make sure those justifications made sense. And in general, what you learn when you're writing in any kind of situation, and this is something that I think I picked out pretty quickly. But it's if you want a story that has civil war and real adult drama, you have to realize that you're never fighting against an enemy or a person or a bad guy. You're fighting against a philosophy or a religion or a and so once you have 2 philosophies that go against each other, or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, once you have these philosophies fighting, it's easy to have civil war as soon as 2 people disagree on the interpretation of the philosophy.
And it felt in Heroes 5, 6, 7, in mainly Academy or Necromancers, it's really felt the way they feel or believe in something and they push it forward. So it was really, and then sometimes you manage to make to understand for everybody that why or how they make their belief and also how they try to push it in their all positive way. Of course, they thought that they beliefs is for more positive way, but sometimes we know that it's not the case. But
I think it was also part of the maturing process. When we were writing, typical fantasy has moved a long way, right? We've moved from having one good guy, one bad guy, right? And then having a hero or a heroine, whatever. And then we realized what's more interesting for us as we grow older is to understand the mechanisms of one philosophy versus another philosophy. So like one nation against another nation. And
in Heroes 2 it was almost just good versus bad, but after that from 5 or maybe from 4 it was in a grey zone.
Yeah, so it was funny because I remember somebody was telling us once, and I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons too, where you had lawful evil and chaotic evil.
Yes,
And
yes.
some of my favorite characters were just Erden of the Dark Elves, and you had these
I hope
characters
there
that
will be more
were-
games soon.
Yeah,
I
totally,
heard.
totally.
Yeah.
I was a huge fan of these, and what I think I loved most about it is that I realized in fantasy we could make social commentary. We could actually try to explore and exaggerate things that you found in real life. I mean, for one thing, if you look at Donald Trump right now, or you look at the political situations, even Brexit in England and all these, and Europe helping each other or not helping each other.
Yes.
But you realize it's often just boils down not to Macron or to Trump or to Putin or whatever. It boils down to whether or not we believe in diversity and sharing
Yes, yes.
our wealth, or whether we believe that in nationalism, or we believe in we need to protect ourselves, or there's all these philosophies that are all valid. I don't think anyone ever wants to. No one, even the bad guys, they never think of themselves as bad guys. They always think of themselves as good guys.
And good purposes and good way, but
Yeah, totally. It's just funny. It just depends on what side of the battle you're on. So what I found fascinating about Might and Magic, and I working on Might and Magic, I pretty much think I developed most of the tools and weapons for my career. I realized that if you take the time to set out and lay down the philosophical rationale of the major forces and the factions, then when you develop your heroes, this is what was really fun. Your heroes always start out as the archetypes or the representatives of their faction. But when they become truly heroic is when they're able to break those laws and those philosophies and take their faction somewhere else. So you could, if you have a necromancer that's, I love this even in Hero 6 when I was working with Asher uses all this philosophy. The Asher.
It was really great idea.
Yeah, it was fun. But what was fun about Asher uses all was that the goddess Asha uses death, life, uses this. She could pretty much justify everything as long as you were trying. It basically was an argument for the greater good. You could justify any action as long as it was for the greater good of everybody. And that's something that's very modern when you think about it. Usually we don't have that kind of philosophy in our modern. We do now, but 100 years ago we didn't really think that way. We thought about either you act on a moral code
in factions, fractions, or nations, but not globally.
Totally. Yeah, or maybe some people would act. Some people would say, okay, the laws of my country are just. I will follow the laws. Okay, I'm acting on my nation's laws and traditions. Some would say, no, I'm acting on the traditions of my religion, or I'm a paladin, or I'm a Jedi Knight or something. So you had basically two things that were fighting. One was you see this a lot in The Mandalorian, if you watch the Star Wars Mandalorian, in the Japanese feudal system, whatever. It's usually the traditional, I'm a man and I follow a code and I need to follow that code. And if my code says never kill a baby, I will never kill a baby.
Yes.
Right?
Like Batman, never kill.
Yeah, right, totally. Whereas if you're in this, I will do what's necessary for the greater good. If that baby is infected by some huge, disease that will kill everybody on the planet, that person would have no trouble killing the baby because it's saving maybe 1 million lives, right? Whereas
sometimes you have influence from the past, from the history as well. Yeah, some fantasies have some influences, Game of Thrones, etc. So it's.
Yeah, totally. All this stuff is interesting, and what you realize is, I think we're just now realizing that video games can create experiences and shared experiences that are just as powerful as movies, or
of course, and longer, and of course it can around you for a longer time, not just for time, but maybe the influences or the effect maybe might be better, or sometimes as a movie. It's flow by 1 hour, 1.5, and sometimes
Totally. I'm at the point where I usually say to myself, it's like you can have and you get to determine how much time you want to spend in it.
And of course,
I think we call a lot more in a video game. We call on your own imagination, especially in a turn-based strategy like Might and Magic.
When you have time to think, or so it's a more pleasure way, not a.
Totally.
Yeah.
And at one point in time, you have trouble getting out of it because you like it so much, and I think that's what's interesting about it, because there's I've always written. I mean, ever since I was. So I guess I started out my career as an engineer, as a producer, or producer, publisher, or whatever. And then when I became a writer, I always wanted to know why I was writing something. I had to have a reason for it. So
I see.
and I thought of. I basically thought of
And
it as
always you make you love it also as well. So the
yeah,
idea.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But it's almost like I feel like writing is like something. You're like a psychoanalysis. You're looking to simulate some kind of problem in your life in a game or in a story to help you figure something out. You're like, why are people still fighting? Why there's still war? Why is there still racism? Why is there still so I was trying to understand it without basically forming an opinion. To stay outside of it.
In general, yeah.
I grew up in America. We have a lot of traditions and laws in America that are completely different than you have in Europe. We're still a very religious nation. Even though we have
and
lots
also
of religion,
the law of the weapons.
Yeah, totally. We have all these weapons. We have there's still a philosophy in America that says it's better to have faith than to have logic.
Sometimes I feel that way, Trump session or something like that.
And it's something until you've lived it, until you've realized it, and you can put that in a video game. You can have if you look at even like Game of Thrones and some other different things, there's people who use their brains and the logic, and there are people who follow their in the stars.
There are the sensual ones and the feeling ones, and the logical ones. Yeah.
And if you look at the Stark family, Winter is coming. There's a right way to do things, right? And and they will never betray that.
Yes.
They're not going to betray. There's a right way to do things. You do things in this order. You're honest. You're frank. You're open. You don't, go behind somebody's back. If you're going to kill them, you kill them. You watch them as you kill them, right? Whereas, then you have others that are much more political.
You would write a series episode also, maybe in the near future.
Yeah, I am working on a TV series right now.
That's great.
Hoping that taken off. Because in the end, if you know how to build yourself a world, and to put two philosophies against each other, you can make a game, you can make a TV series, you can make a novel, you can make a poem.
So it's not so much different in that way.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's one of the methodologies that I learned when
that's really great.
Working in video games is like I used to worry a lot about having the great idea and the great characters and I always start with the world. And then I find out I have these great characters emerging from my worlds because they want to change those worlds. They want to save them, or they want to destroy them, or they want to have some sort of impact on those worlds. So you end up. It's a lot longer, I think, at first, but the result is at the end you've got it. It's much easier to write. You're not trying to invent. These characters just kind of come alive. Maybe it's part of what I do, I guess, but. So I'll take some time. I take time. I treat a world like it was some sort of giant construction site, right? So if we're in Budapest building some huge, like theme park or something, we would start by figuring out how many people.
There will be Assassin's Creed Budapest.
Totally, that'd be awesome.
Many Hungarians would like that with the World War I or World War II in the times of.
The oldest outsourced studio outside of France is in Romania. It's in Bucharest. It's the oldest outsourced studio. It's the first one that they did outside of France, actually.
It's a new one, new studio.
I think they've been around 15 years. I forget how long.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but they're not far from you. I mean,
not far.
Yeah, not far. I was.
And there are many Hungarians live there because many parts of Romania once was part of Hungary, so there are many Hungarians and also so.
Yeah, I know. You guys have a very interesting history.
Yeah, now just 100 years old. This pact because of this pact.
History. Yeah, I have a lot of friends from Yugoslavia, ex-Yugoslavia too.
Yeah, also Yugoslavia. It's again.
Yeah, there's like tons of Yugoslavians.
Puzzled down from two free countries. Yeah.
But it's almost
Sadly.
like a Magic Game of Thrones, that part of the world.
Yeah.
There's so many different reasons to fight each other. You never know. Like, well,
sadly.
But I also was quite fond of Hungarian because I have a friend for like 35 years who speaks like 6-7 languages.
Oh.
But Hungarian is the hardest language in the world to learn.
Yeah, maybe top three. Maybe Chinese, maybe.
Chinese, Hungarian,
Hungarian,
English.
yeah, and Polish,
Yeah,
if I heard well.
Especially the master. I have friends in Finland. Theirs is pretty close to.
I worked in Poland. Polish is the hardest Slavic language.
Is it?
I can
Okay.
say so, and they say so. Harder than Russian and etc. So
Yeah, I've heard it too. Yeah, it's really hard to follow, but so I stuck to French and English. I guess what happened was I left America because I was I didn't want to work over there. It's just I wanted to have adventure, travel around. And
so you like traveling
getting-
also. You like traveling also, yeah?
Yeah, I like traveling. Yeah. So when I was an engineer, I traveled a lot of countries in Singapore to Vietnam to Africa, South Africa as well. Yeah, I was a pretty good consultant in project management,
I see.
and I was really good at helping break down a project and
Communications, etc.
Yeah, so I guess you might call me a process engineer, and that really helped me a lot when I started putting up writing in video games, because you don't write a video game the same way you write a book.
And it's a long process, yeah, long work, long-term work.
It's also you can't just start writing chapter 1 and go to chapter 13. You have to write. You have to kind of create. It's more of a painting, I think. With different layers of depth.
You must think around. You must know the basements. And after that, you can repair and build up
just
upon
designing a creature faction. And so and then for example, if you want to have a faction of necromancers, what is the lineup of those necromancers?
Oh, you still work on the creature lines also.
Yeah, creature lines. Yeah, so you end up doing a lot of work figuring out what the
I was only
justifications
thought
are.
about the story, but you worked on the creatures also. Yeah, that's great.
I worked on
the backgrounds,
for
etc.
for Might and Magic, I would say. So I wrote several campaigns in the different versions.
that's great.
The writing was like 10% of the job. Like 10-15% of it, the actual stories. It was the fun part. It was the tip of the iceberg. But generally, we'd start out. We'd have to do the creature lineups, the factions things. Now those were done together with the game designers as well. So, and the rational designers. So we'd figure it out, and then we would go back and look into the world, and then justify. So you couldn't just have a skeletal dragon. We had to have a reason for that.
I see.
You couldn't just have. We had to make sure it made sense with the lore and the background and the Bible of the universe.
Of course.
you had to make sure that if we had an academy, where do they live? Where are they on the map? So that's when we realized that the academy had
and how they use their magic to make some animal kind of half-man creatures,
combining beastmen and that kind of thing. And what we realized was
what they used for against the demons, etc. So
totally. And then for us, Academy was probably one of the factions we developed the most, because.
Well, which one? Academy.
Yeah, Academy, because Academy is at the origin of basically all the creatures in the world.
Yeah.
They did the Beastmen.
And also the Necropolis, origin.
The necromancers are a school of Academy.
Yeah.
So even all the necromancers come from Academy. The old Academy, right? And then we had all of the Beastmen, we had all the constructs. They were another school of Academy. And so this was interesting because we spent weeks and weeks trying to figure out how defining the parameters of the world, making sure that we could stay coherent, and we wanted to simplify it. Because the big trick there's two ways to do magic, right? You can just say, screw it, it's magic. We'll do whatever we want, right?
Yes.
Magic, which is an attitude that Erwin, nor I, nor Jeff, nor Julian adhered to. We made sure anytime there was anything in our world that made sense in terms of the lore, the pantheon of the gods.
Or there is an explanation, a cause for it, so something like that, yeah.
Well, just because if you don't explain it now, if you don't explain why it came there, what happened, you can't do it later. And then what happens is it's really hard to do later because things start conflicting each other. So what becomes interesting is if you invest in the IP, you invest in the world in Ashen, and you go in through it and everything.
Or will be confusing, later for the video gamers.
I mean, we worked on this. We worked on all the books of the world of Magic and that kind of thing. Because I think we're one of the only IPs in Ubisoft that has a really defined vision, with all the world
and the vision for the it's great.
Yeah, we actually worked really hard on it. But that was the basis. So when you're writing in a video game, you kind of have to treat it like you're an architect or an engineer, and you're laying out all the guidelines so that when you have, I don't know if you've ever painted a bedroom or something, you're painting the kitchen, whatever. You can just start painting, and then afterward you can go scrape off your windows and scrape off the furniture with a razor blade or whatever. It takes forever.
Maybe make it more detailed or something like that, specific.
Or what you can do is you can put down a bunch of Scotch tape all around your windows, like tape. Yeah. And then the painting's really fun. Mm-hmm. So world building for me is like putting Scotch tape in a room when you're painting. You have to make sure you set up your structures, you set up your world, you set up your creatures, your factions, your world guides.
And need for many meeting, for that, because of it's a group.
What?
You need some meeting about that also,
a lot of meetings. I think we probably had, maybe before we do any game, we'd have 10 or 15 sessions of brainstorming and world alignment before we'd even start writing the first campaign. And then and then we would just do maybe a 2-liner or a 3-line word for the campaign.
Oh, I see. So there are many preparations for that also.
Yeah, so when you've done all that work, then you can start writing the campaign. And is it going to be 4 maps, 3 maps, 5 maps? Is it going to be, we had a lot of fun with Blood, and even though it didn't do as well, we hope that the Blood and Tears.
Yeah, it was great.
Because you could write two different progressions in the campaign and that kind of thing.
Almost so like in an alt mixture of faction. So you have a faction, but almost a 2 type of it, because of that, So it was really great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you gotta play 2 philosophies within the same faction. Yeah. The one that believed in diversity and the one that believed in basically might makes right.
And and you have some skills also with that, so it was really great. Yeah.
It was. We did.
But it was a prequel, so it was a general idea before Heroes 6.
Yeah,
that it will be a prequel, and after that.
Erwin wanted to put in the game. He really wanted that feature. I think today what we realized is we should have. Well, it's always complicated because the VIP community always loves Heroes 3 so much that it's really hard to give them anything else.
It's great also, but I think with game mechanics it's not quite good now, because maybe 20 skills in Heroes 3 for Heroes now 100 or 200, so you have more possibilities.
One thing for sure though is if you I think one thing for sure is, and I find it in a lot of different games, there's a lot of risk you take. You just try to create something. The games like Heroes, and games like even Civilization, or games like Crusader Kings 2,
Total War or something like that. Yeah.
There's a lot of, you have to have a lot of faith in the fact that the game's actually going to kind of emerge once you put it all together, right? That there's going to be a fun experience, because there's so many different systems and features being mixed into it.
It's not an easy
job. The magic
job.
happens or the magic doesn't, and sometimes the magic happens and everyone's like, cool, it's great, it's fun. And sometimes it's like, it's clunky and it's not easy and it's
but
not.
I think for Heroes 7 many people didn't quite like it. But for Heroes 7 I think maybe the main problem was the engine, and Julian told that way also, that RE3 was not a real great choice. First it seemed. First time.
Some engine problems. We also had I think we had budget problems. We had less money.
I heard the budget.
Yeah, we had less money to make 7 than we did 6, and less money to make 6 than we did 5, and so.
And of course in 5 the 3D town screens was really expensive. I heard, but the 3D town screens. Fans really liked it.
I guess in the end it's more about. It's complicated to make a game. It's really complicated to make a game. But the fun is just making sure that you. I've never how to say this. Everyone I worked with on the Might and Magic lines, and in general, in video games in general, especially with all the French studios and German studios I worked with, you have a lot of passionate people trying to make a very good game. It's just and no one's as the market increases and evolves, it's harder and harder to make a game with few people.
I see. Yeah.
And so a lot of the difficulty is
Need some new players always at the time, and
players change, and then of course you don't, and then you have to always be careful too, especially a world like Might and Magic
for the fan base. Yeah, yeah. So
for 30 years, people have been playing these games, and
20 years.
You have to have a good mixture between always giving something new, and still catering to the fans that have been there for 30 years, so to speak. But if you don't give something new, what you find out is you become kind of passé and cliché.
Yes. Some people talked about Heroes 7 in negative way, that it has got no one new thing, maybe only one, the flanking system, but no other new things, and they made it that way in negative way because it's just a rehash of Heroes 3, 5, so sometimes some people don't quite like if it's so conservative, but some people don't like if it's a refreshed one, so you really can't you find the mix between, sometimes
it's hard because it's difficult too, because they're very difficult. I don't think anyone's ever really understood from a video game publisher point of view why Might and Magic Heroes 3 was so popular. You can't make the same game, otherwise it's just still Heroes Might 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. You have to evolve, right? You have more technology, you have more expectations.
But the Hungarian page, there's a Hungarian page, Heroes page, fan page. The leader, Volodya, maybe you heard about him. Me and he organized, the first private Heroes concert with Paul in Budapest. It was really great. And he said that Heroes 1, 2. It's just version 1, version 2, version 3 from all the same. So Heroes 1, 2, 3, it's almost the same game, but average it and average it for the best, way until 3, and after that it was not the same, not version 1. It was whole new game in every chapter. But from Heroes 1 and 2, 3, it's just an evolution, from Heroes to 1 to 3. So. Yeah.
The big risk they took was Heroes 3 to 4.
Yeah.
I think this was before Ubisoft got the license. There was some Heroes.
And 5. Also they prepare Heroes 5, but they bankrupted.
Yeah, totally. And I think Heroes 4 they launched it too soon. There was because of the budget, and the bankrupt. You could run around with 4 heroes on the battlefield and destroy armies.
Yeah, and also there is a bug. My friend told about that. If your heroes die, you can carry, it's what is the, I don't know now the English name, I don't remember, but they're buried, and until they dead, they carry XP over again. So so it was a bug.
But it was something, I think it was just rushed to market because they were having financial difficulties, and
maybe,
so they launched the game a little too soon. And it's
but it has a great idea. So if I hope there will be a new game with the 25th anniversary, maybe Heroes will be again on the battlefield as well, because many fans like that way. But they not balance it because of the financial problems. But
I don't know. It's the kind of game. I mean, it's the games I really like to play because. I guess it's part of what I liked about. There's different kinds of storytelling. There's linear storytelling. You can read a book, you can watch a movie, but there's this emergent storytelling where you go on these journeys and you start telling stories in your head with the different events lining up, the way you want. And that's something I'm really fond of playing, and I'm really fond of writing that too. I really enjoy giving people the chance to piecemeal the story together. But I worked on a lot of different kind of games, and I worked over 50 games,
I saw that.
And I like them all. I like all of them.
But it's different, you work for a fantasy game, or Brothers in Arms, so you work. So it's not.
I guess if you look at the last games I worked on, I'm working on Curse of the Dead Gods, which is a game out of Lyon.
Oh, I see.
It's a roguelite game, where you try to escape a dungeon. I love that. There's no linear story. It's all emergent, where you go through this dungeon and go over and over again. I'm working on a vampire game with a company in France. It's a fun game as well.
Yeah,
I worked on
really
Vampire with them at Nod. I really enjoyed that. That was fun. It was World War One. That was really a blast.
Oh, I
And
see.
I worked on Ghost Recon. I was lead writer for Ghost Recon Breakpoint for a year and a half. That was a huge game. Like $100 million game, AAA.
Oh.
And it didn't sell as well as we were hoping, but it was still. I had 7 writers working with me and 7 narrative designers, and it was a lot of fun to work on that. But it was still very tense and very. But that's modern day, Tom Clancy Ghost Recon Warfare.
Yes.
Right now I'm working on a horror TV series. Modern day, I can't talk about it, but I'm enjoying that.
Horror.
Yeah, I love horror. I love. Actually, I kind of go where anytime there's a world to build, and characters to create, and stories to tell that help people, I think, see different points of view, with these philosophies that collide and all that. I enjoy going there. That's what I really do. I enjoy going there. I'm also always writing new concepts, writing new games, writing new ideas. As long as I feel like, I guess my job is to create extra lives for people. I've kept that from video games. You try to give people a chance to experience the world from someone else's point of view, whether it be some necromancer, which is always a metaphor, for someone who wants to do the greater good in my head, right? But who doesn't mind, it's the ends, not the means that justify my acts. That's so in my head, I think if I can work with it, and I work with other people, right? But if we can create an experience, craft an experience where you're going to come out of that game having seen someone else's perspective, someone else's point of view, then I've helped you. I've given you an extra life. I've given you an extra point of view, and that's all. That's my job. I teach a lot of classes now too. I teach in France, in different schools. And
maybe
more
teach
more,
writing later, how to write,
Yeah, how to write your own stories. Yeah, I do a lot of basically how to create your own worlds, and how to write stories from those worlds. That's what I teach here in Georges Méliès and at Isart in Paris. These are I love it. I love working with the students. They're fantastic. And I think my only job really is to tell them, listen, you've got all of you you'll have a chance to write in your stories, to tell stories. But you even have the job. It's your responsibility to give your point of view, because otherwise we're just going to keep hearing the same points of view for the next 30, 40 years that we've already invented in the 60s and 70s and 80s of last century. It's vital to have the generations that are coming up's point of view. They just so we can help get to the next stage. The 21st century is going to be a tricky century. We got to save the planet, and we got to not die in the process. So
I hope we can do, but and how did you manage to travel to France and live there? First it was a little bit strange, interesting, it's because you said that it's really different from USA, I think,
France is like
how you write about France? What kind of
what's interesting about France? They're a country of contradictions, it's where America is a country of causes, and you think it's more binary, right? In America, you're with me or against me. It's very interesting how I see where Americans I love. I'm American, but I also love my country, and I'm thankful of all those origins. I like the idea that people are kind of nice and kind, and they're generous, and they always give you a chance in America, right?
That's great.
That's true. But in France, people are more conservative and they're more critical, and they never seem happy, even though they're always arguing and all that. But they're very refined, and their criticism is because they're always trying to make something better.
I see.
And I think it takes you a long time. There's an expression: it takes 7 years. It takes 7 days to love France and 7 years to love the French.
Ah,
You know,
yeah.
it's really it's like
The French
you
people.
come, yeah, you're gonna love France when you're here. France is just beautiful. The food's fantastic. The people are sophisticated. The women are beautiful.
Yes, as
The
your wife.
cities are the architecture is fantastic. You know, everyone's so refined and they have a
and
great
yeah, and
lifestyle.
the foods and the music, yeah, also, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the streets and the museums, and
Museums,
they
yeah.
really celebrate this civilization and their culture. Or whatever.
Mhm.
But at the same time, they're always arguing and always never smiling, and you know, it's like, and
They
you're
try
wondering,
to
wow,
make
how does
everything better, yeah, always better.
yeah, that was better. Even the waiters aren't polite, and
Uh,
the things, and then after a while, you realize it's just the way, it's just part of their culture, right? I mean, when I was in Romania, they always seem to be complaining, but in a funny way, you know, because they're the Ceausescu
yes,
trademark, you
yes,
know, from
era, yeah.
right? But it's like they have a great sense of humor in Romania, but it's it takes a while to understand they're joking, you know,
Yeah,
because it's just
yeah.
what are you guys joking? It's so
And also they
self-derogating.
managed to defeat this era,
If you go
so it
if you
was.
go to Germany, they're all very strict and very organized. They're very polite and very
Mm-hmm.
kind. They're and if you go to Belgium, everyone smiles. Even though they speak
Well,
French, but everyone's smiling all the time, and they're very funny and they're very they don't take themselves so seriously. So it's interesting to see how each culture
like
has these
beers
different
also, yeah.
things. Right? And America is the same as if you think of
Mhm.
America all in all. I'm being unfair by saying I'm talking more about the Midwest. If you go to the
Mhm.
East Coast, it's a different America. If you go to the West Coast, it's
I
a
see,
different
yeah,
America.
yeah, it's not the same.
Texas is different. East Coast is more like Europe. The West Coast
Mhm.
is more like nothing you can imagine. It's just completely different.
Huh.
So and there's more than. But what's most important is to realize, even though we're good at making these stereotypical judgments, because it helps us kind of like get the color of a place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The heroes of any country or nation are the ones that build off of what the country's given them, and they go out there and they create something new. I think that's
Uh-huh.
what I really find vital if you want to create a good hero or a good character. You've got to give them a grounding that's based on their upbringing and their culture
Mhm.
and trademark and where they come from. Is he Hungarian? Is he a man?
I see,
Yeah,
yeah,
or whatever. Is he a woman? You know, was he religious? Was he not religious? You give these characteristics of where they come from, and then they start out that way in their stories. And then
yeah. Mhm.
as life attacks them or whatever, they realize when they're really heroic that they need to go beyond what they were given.
Hmm.
But some of them have to renounce it, right? Some of them have to
Yes.
say, okay, I'm not, I'm quitting the Hitler Youth, you know, that kind of, right? Like, some of them might say, let's change the Hitler Youth and turn it into something else, the Boy Scouts or something. You know, it's like there's such a fine line every time between things. So there's always someone that has to go. It's really hard because it's like a treasure. You find this in every civilization, every culture, and when
Mhm.
you look for characters that are interesting that came from somewhere but are going somewhere else.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and I think that's what video games are able to do now, as well as anything, because you can put yourself in the shoes of a hero that's born
Mhm.
in action,
And the
whether it be
road is important. What will he will be later, and the road until that.
yeah,
Yeah. So
really. We
it's.
had so much fun in Heroes Six.
Mhm.
Heroes Six, we got into this a lot. Heroes because we had a family that we were tearing
Yeah, it's
apart.
a dynasty. Yeah, it was really
Yeah,
great.
it was a lot of fun because you could have made one a necromancer and made the other one. Yeah,
I would love
Tomas.
to see more factions in
Yeah,
Heroes
it
Six.
was really fun because you could take one family and tear them apart.
Yes, yes.
But what was interesting was we were able to do something kind of Games of Thrones where you have a family that's being pushed into other
And
archetypes.
torn apart almost. Yeah,
And
in
for the
every
part, yeah, it
way.
was
So.
fun. It was fun because you got to learn more about them
Hmm.
and see that those bonds of family were still stronger than the bonds
Yes, yes, yes.
created by their factions and their
Great.
powers, and your actions, and that's always exciting. I think today what's more important is saying, okay, if I'm an American living in France, okay, if I say that to 90% of people, they're gonna like, okay, they have to go in their head and they go, okay, what's an American? Okay, he's a white guy. He's old. He's in his 50s. He's like, what's his? And he's been living in France for 30 years. Okay, he's got a French wife. You start trying to figure out who I am
Huh.
by these by all of these different nicknames, and categories and stereotypes there. And then in the end, though, it's like until you get to know me, until you meet me, until you have a beer with me or something, you're not really going to. At one point in time, if we see each other enough, I start no longer becoming the American that lives in France, the 50-year-old guy that's written all these games and all these books. I become just Kurt, and then you say, okay, that's Kurt, And so at that point in time, that's when you've even in your own life around all the people that are around you, that's kind of the progress you have to do in a story if you want it to feel real. You have to right away give people this kind of stereotypical thing. That's his prison. It's also his fortress, right? But it's his prison as well. It's his fortress. Prison.
It's a two-way thing, yeah.
But it's like everything. If you want that character to be interesting, and you want me to believe your character, what's most challenging is when I confront that person with decisions that are going to push him out beyond the fortress in his prison, help him liberate himself. So what you find out in life is most things that make you unhappy are things that are just something in your head, like right? It's the fact there's just some kind of prison that you set up in yourself. Our parents love us to death, right? My American family loves me to death. But at one point, I might have to leave the nest, go beyond what I was taught, and that's good too. And the parents are always happy when you finally do it. But there's a point in time where they're like, "What are you doing? Are you sure this is a good idea? You can stay home. Don't go out."
They live in Indiana as well, yeah.
Yeah, Indiana. Yeah.
And what's that state like? Indiana? It's hillish or something like that, or plains that are general, something like that.
It's one of those states that's hard to imagine unless you've been there. But it's right below the Great Lake, Michigan.
I see.
So it's kind of a state that, other than Indianapolis, which was the Indianapolis 500 and the Colts, the
Indianapolis also, yeah.
Yeah, Indianapolis is this big 500. It's a sport town from the Indianapolis 500 and the Colts and Reggie Miller with the Pacers. You have to imagine that Indiana didn't ever have a navigable river that ran through it. Right? We've got the Ohio River right below at the bottom that goes into Mississippi. It's a train town. It's a train country. It's train country, right? All by trains. So the top 2/3 of it's all flat, cut by the glaciers. Farmland that used to be forest.
There are many farms there.
Lots of farms. And in the south, it gets hilly where the glaciers stopped when they were coming over the Great Lakes. It was called Indiana because there were lots of Native Americans there before, and America colonized all around Indiana before, and there were still Shawnee and Miami Indians inside.
There are some reservatories there or something like that.
Yeah, and then eventually we got rid of all those people and sent them across to poor people across to the west. So Indiana became a state right after. Indiana became a state kind of right after all the states around it. Its southern borders Kentucky, above is Michigan. There's Illinois with Chicago to the west of it, and east of it's Ohio. So you got all these. It's a state that you would never go there on purpose. I don't think unless you're going to Gen Con. Gen Con's the show that's canceled this year, unfortunately, for Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games and things. Gen Con is now no longer in Geneva. It's called the Geneva Convention. It's now in Indianapolis. So you think about Indiana. Think of a state that's always been. To give you an example, Indiana voted for Obama in the first election, and then against Obama in the second term. So it's a state that's always been on the middle. It goes back and forth. It can vote left. It can vote right. It's a state with a lot of common sense that people kind of think it was mostly German in the north, and there's Quaker German. A lot of Amish are still there. A lot of Amish communities are still there. So if you think about it, it's more like people that sit around and talk. Huguenot Protestants and Quakers and
it's a calmer state, if I can say so. Not Western like or something like that. It's a calmer one, yeah. It's peaceful.
It's considered. You say it's part of the Midwest. The Bible Belt, the Rust Belt, the Steel Belt, the Automobile Belt. It's part of that. It's part of the West. It's got an interesting history. But what I found leaving it was a place where people could still talk. It's a civilized state where people would think and talk. Now that's changed a lot, I think, since the Fox News versus CNN battles.
I see.
Now it's pretty much a divided state where, like most of America, especially in the Midwest, where half the state votes left, half the state votes right, and it's very bitter. There's very bitter lines.
But I think Trump will be not elected again. I think many people think that way. But
we'll see what happens. I'm not really sure. It's like I think America right now is kind of caught up in its own video game. We're trying to figure stuff out. We don't really know who to believe anymore.
Sadly.
It's like you can't believe the rumors at the tavern, and you can't believe the kings, the queens of your nation. So
sadly,
you just basically, we've gotten to the point where a chaos wizard is taking over, and they're just sending us spells of chaos and communication. I actually think sometimes Donald Trump incarnates the trickster, the Joker. He's become this mad Joker, and so it's an interesting way. He doesn't follow his own rules, So. And he makes them. So it's an interesting kind of character. It's almost like Loki in the Nordic mythology, where you've got this kind of trippy guy. And I think at this point in time, when your nation no longer trusts your political forces, you'd rather have Loki in charge than Thor. So let's let Loki run things for a while and see what that does. It can't be any worse than having Thor, shooting his hammer around. So they. And I think like a fantasy writer, but I try not to get in there and try to take sides, because my job is to observe what's going on and try to figure out what the next steps are going to be. But if I start trying to say, I believe in, I'm a champion of diversity. I really believe in cultural and religious and racial diversity is what makes the human species.
And in nowadays, values, and the old positive thinking way, and in this modern world it's less. I think the value means less totally. Now. That sometimes almost in every side changing their forms in a second. So
it's a weird world, man. It's like if you're too optimistic, they think of you as naive and stupid, and if you're too pessimistic, you're not trustworthy because you don't believe in anything. So
the media, it's almost sometimes the cause, some way, the worldwide media. But
I think we're at a point in time now where it's definitely a time where we need to start learning how to think for ourselves and
and how believing in ourselves more better.
And I think the most important thing is not to think the truth right away.
Yes.
Take your time, think about it. Don't jump in there and think
read everything and everything if possible.
I think you'll never. I don't know if we'll ever have enough information to be able to decide. I think what I love about video games is you can build a world that answers one question at a time, right? You can say, okay, let's build a world where everyone's blind.
Yeah.
Let's build a world like they did on C, they did the Apple House of series. And it's going to be less complicated, even though it sounds kind of rich and everything, but it's going to be less complicated. And if you go to that world with us for a couple, 10 episodes, or for a video game, or whatever, Plague's Tale is a really good French game that came out not too long ago. I really liked it. Yeah. But you simplify the world by making it adventurous and doing these things. But you're able, at that point in time, when you go into Greedfall, Greedfall, we had a lot of fun working with Jean Rousseau on that.
It's an RPG, yeah? It's not a role-playing game, yeah?
Yeah, Greedfall, it's a metaphorical world that explores the dangers and the reasons for colonialism, right? And also at the same time, how we she's written it from a European perspective, how we Europeans, and I consider Americans to be, European descendants, or whatever, how we have such a really messed up relationship with nature, and how we take from nature, but we don't give anything back to nature, and we find that totally normal. where we consume resources. We don't
Yes,
perpetuate resources, right?
sadly.
We're not guardians, we're takers, that kind of thing. So she created a civilization.
Great idea. I will try it if I will have a possibility.
You come as a European that's basically trying to find a cure for a panacea for a sickness back in Europe, and you go to this island where everyone worships animals and stuff, and then you realize that they have a completely different culture where they even call people from your world bad traders. Because they only trade one way. They don't trade. They don't look for an equal trade. Where in their culture, everything has to be reciprocal, right? Even if you take food from the ground, you have to put something back.
Yes, or give back something.
Yeah, totally. So it was a lot of fun. It's the game world's fantastic. It's ambitious as well, but that was a lot of fun. And so that's just an example. Okay, so this is a world that asks that question, right? What is sustainability and what does it mean?
And sometimes fantasy asks questions for us for the reality, so from the reality.
Your best games do that. Because art's just a way of helping us solve problems, in our real life, or at least share them with other people, right? So that you feel less alone.
But share in an interesting way, of course. But yeah.
Yeah, even you and me and whoever, when you're a fan of a magic universe, you're sharing something, right? You're sharing a common passion. So at this point in time, you become closer because you share. And you're not. Doesn't mean you're the same. It actually just means you're different, but you share something, which brings you closer together. I think what I found about this is with Julian, who came from the mod community of my
yeah.
He's somebody who's just passionate about it, and then just kept working in it, and then eventually got hired by Ubisoft and to help craft the experiences. But in the end, it's about having that generosity to say, okay, I want to feel less alone in the world, right? So I go out there and so at the same time, I think our job as writers, or even game makers in general, or even if you're a songwriter or you're a poet or you're a novel writer or a comic book writer, whatever you do, your first job is just to be honest with yourself and say, hey, I have this question I've been asking. I might not know the answer, but I'm going to create a place where you can come in and ask that question with me. Characters are going to ask it, and we're going to debate it, and we're going to fight over it. We're going to kill people over it. But at that point in time, we explore together a problem in the real world in a different way. And our goal, I think, is just to find a new way of looking at problems so we can solve them for real. Right? So
and which is the hardest, maybe, in the process of writing? Making a character or a world, making the basement of the world, or maybe the plot or something like that.
Yeah. I think what I do, my techniques, when I teach, I guess, in schools and things, is I always say to my students, and I say this to people, anybody who asks me, there's different kinds of people, right? There's creatives, right? There's usually schools and schools. I pretty much, so some people just want to tell the truth, right? But in any case, you have something to say, otherwise you wouldn't make a game or a world. Some people just want to say, oh, life is bad, life is terrible. They like a documentary. They want to show something real. They want to show the violence, or they want to show the problem of women and slavery and of children. So they'll try to create something as realistic and truthful as possible because they want you to see this thing, right? That's not a very good video game thing right now. We don't know how to do that in video games. We can't do realism very well. Even though there are people who are doing it in interactive storytelling, but the other school is, hey, let's create something so beautiful that it transcends all of time and space. That's a classic kind of beauty, right? Yeah. I prefer that kind of story. Right?
Me too, maybe. Yeah.
There's one. Now there's other people, and so those are just things when you get to meet people. There's other people that are more about the message, right? The message. So the content. What's the saying? What's the deep down? What's the intellectual contribution? What's the meaning in this game? Other people are more like, I want to see something, the container. I want it to follow this genre. I want it to be Might and Magic 3.1. You know,
Yes,
I want
yes.
it to be exactly like, so they're more about the genre or they're about the form, all right? Or other people are about the. So what I've learned is, I learned that I'm more of a message guy and a classic guy, right? So I'm more of this classic message guy. I want to look for transcendental truths. I'm searching for things that can transcend, and I want to see people go on these journeys, right? To find it. So once you discover that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to create a world where not everyone's going to be able to work that way, because that's for me what I found out was I'm going to create worlds where I ask myself a question in my real life: what's bothering me? It bothers me there aren't more women writing in video games, for example. Why aren't there more women? Is it because they don't want to write? Is it because they do want to write? Is it because this? And so I could write a game. Then I'd say, okay, let's build a world where everyone in the world is a woman, right? Okay,
Yeah,
for example. So then we could explore. If you look at the Handmaid's Tale, which is this huge
yeah,
series, which is really
I
powerful.
watched the.
They did something similar, right? They said, let's just look at the plight of women, but rather than making them all positive, let's make it all as negative as we possibly can. Let's push everything to the extreme. Where we've actually taken women and turned them into objects of reproduction, right? It's horrifying when you watch it. But at the same time, they're exploring real problems of today, but they're so exaggerated that you learn something from it. So I'm working on a comic book series where I was asking myself, okay, am I a good father? Am I a good friend? Do I love the people around me the way I should love them? Okay, that's why I said, okay, how can I? And so I realized I needed to explore that, because sometimes you don't feel like, with internet, you don't get I've got 500 Facebook friends and I never get to call everybody, and I'm like, oh, I'm a bad friend.
Oh, I see.
So I said, so I decided to build a comic book world where if you love someone else, that gives them power, magical power, right, to throw spells, if you love someone too much, they can use that against you. They can control you like a puppet, right? And I started building a world around that, and then that world came into a comic book thing, and we're working on it right now. Hopefully, it'll come out in next year
That's great.
or 2021. But the world started out with that idea. I wanted to ask myself, what does it mean to be a good friend? What does it mean to love someone as much as they deserve to love them? Why is there a danger in it? Why do we hold back our feelings from people we like? Why don't we tell them, hey, I really like you? And so I said, let's make a world where I can exacerbate that and turn it into your real power. And the fear you have of being controlled by someone because you've shown them you like them too much, like your girlfriend or your mother or father or your whatever. What I realize is our society is built like that. And I'm learning as I'm writing all this stuff, and I'm hoping that readers will learn it too, right? You realize
sounds great.
Yeah, we're so afraid of being controlled by people we love that we have trouble telling them our true feelings for them, right? And at the same time, if we tell them too much, then they think we're kind of weird, like, why they tell me this? Something's wrong. Don't tell me this. I don't want to know. Because and it's either because they don't think the same way I do, or they might even think that love's not something you talk about, or friendship's not something you have to confirm. You're either friends or you're not friends, that kind of thing. In any case, well, that's what I find art's good at. Art's good at helping you figure that out and exploring it. And so I built a whole world, then I built factions, and I built magic systems, and I built everything around that question. So at that point in time, I go from a world to a series of stories where this family's trying to keep their power, right? So they have to be careful who they love, who they don't love, otherwise the power goes to the other person.
It's really a great
it's been
idea.
a lot of fun.
It's a unique thing.
Working with a Roman illustrator, she's really great in Rome, from Italy. So I work with people all over the planet, but we always look for something where we can see there's an angle to it. There's something, like, for example, there's another series I'm working on. Why do you want to escape? Why does everyone want to live forever? That kind of thing. Why are we seeking immortality? Why are we
the basic philosophic questions,
yeah, there's philosophical questions. But then you take that basic underlying thing, you build a world where that's possible, and then you make normal stories in that world. But the stories will be always a little bit different. Like, one of my favorite worlds is Monster Inc.
Yeah,
Pixar.
yeah, Pixar.
I just love that world, right? I mean, this guy's just a genius, right? It's a world. Imagine it's a world, and I'm sure they did it this way, right? They probably said, "Hey, let's do a thing where monsters come out of a closet to scare girls and stuff. Let's take the point of view of the monsters." Right?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, that's awesome. Taking the point of view of the monsters that scare children for a living, right? That's pretty cool, you know. But what about the world then? Well, the world's a world where they use the energy of fear to power all of their buildings and their homes and everything. So I'm like, oh, these guys are geniuses. So if you look at the metaphor, it's kind of what we do in our real world, right? We
yeah,
have a world based on petrol or mining, coal, whatever, fossil fuels, whatever. We
electricity.
justify that by scaring everybody all the time about war, about terrorism, about and so we're always when I think of petrol, or when I think of oil, or when I think of coal, I think of misery and fear.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just like, and it's like, oh, Monster Inc. And then what you realize is when you watch that movie, it helps you realize, you learn a lot of stuff by watching that movie. One is there's got to be another way, There's
yes,
gotta
yes,
be another
yes.
way. And let's make kids laugh, or let's make it, as opposed to making kids cry or scare them, right?
Yeah,
And that's what I find to be brilliant about Monster Inc. Because the world has a question, metaphorically, and the characters in the story explore that question, and then they actually come up with a better response that's quite poetic, with making kids laugh rather than making kids,
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
which is really
it's a
cool.
really
But
cool
that's what I
idea.
try to do. That's what I try to do in
It's really great.
everything I write. I try to make sure there's a reason for it.
Of course.
What am I? And if I don't, sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you start writing, you don't know why. I did a Dragon Seed, I did that way a little bit. I just know there's something really driving me. And I think it was more about, for me, Dragon Seed, when I wrote those comic books, it was more about trying to figure out the difference between my parents' generation and my generation. Where I was pretty convinced that my parents were these dragons, they'd won World War II. My grandparents, they'd made all these sacrifices and everything for our generations, so we could be happy and everything. But they didn't tell us how to be happy. We didn't know. They didn't know either.
How
but
they feel in that way,
yeah. So I felt like there'd be these dragons, they're all kind of depressed all the time, and they're powerful, and they've got all this stuff, and we're the children of dragons. That's what Dragon Seed, you're a child of a dragon, half and half human, and you're supposed to go out there and carry on and have a good existence. Except in the world that we created, it's a lot harder.
Of course, yeah. And I saw that you are really great musicians also, yeah, with your wife.
Oh, yeah,
How do you manage that, or it's a hobby or something like that? Or
It started out. I think my first joy was music. I went as a first joy. Music was my way to get away from thinking about math questions and all the things. So I played trumpet in high school. I learned piano a little bit, and I picked up guitar a lot later. But I like writing songs, all the time, and I write songs for myself and for my friends and everything. And then eventually, I started getting songs. I have a couple songs published by Ubisoft actually. One in Call of Juarez. I have the song
really?
Silas Greaves. I wrote that.
I played that
song and the lyrics and Silas Greaves for Call of Juarez 4, and it was a lot of fun. But I really enjoy it. I love it. But I that's not the path. I think if I were to, there was probably some turning point where I could have been a music writer rather than a game writer.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like in everybody's life, right? There's that one door you didn't open or whatever, went the wrong way, that one encounter you didn't make, whatever. But I'm happy what I do, right? But I could play music all day and write songs, but it's just not. Once you start making your living and doing something creative that you like, then that usually kind of like, and I've been really fortunate. I work in a lot of different media. And if tomorrow someone said, hey, let's write a musical, let's write a musical comedy. Let's write.
Oh, that's great.
let's write Les Miserables or something, or something. Let's write a musical on Tolstoy or something.
Yeah.
Sure, let's do it. But the first thing I'll look for a way to make sure I can get paid a little bit of money to keep my house,
Of course,
my electricity on, like that.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so usually it means that pipeline where you can actually write and make your living at, if you don't have those connections set up in your life, you have to take a big risk, right?
Yes,
And
it's functional.
and plus, I've never written even though I've played in plays and things, I've never written a musical comedy, so
Of course.
I'm sure I have to learn a lot more of the first one than with the second one. It's
And
like a learning curve,
sometimes
right?
there's humor, in your writings also, yeah? If I feel that way.
The what?
Sometimes humor is in your writings, yeah?
Yeah,
If I felt well.
I always try to create somebody that's.
Mhm.
I found out that
Some
I
jokes,
think I think I'm more a situational humor guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I like to create situations that are funny.
Bluebeak,
Uh,
from Hero 6.
Yeah, I do. I like trying to create situations that are sad and tragic, but at the same time, I find, particularly in video games, it's really, really, really hard to imagine a world where people are immortal, or where people can throw a fireball and destroy an army, right?
Yes.
And what I find to be interesting is at one point in time, you realize today, 100 years ago, it would have been really hard to imagine someone with the power of an iPhone.
Yeah. Or an
But
atomic
in the
bomb
end,
or something like that, yeah.
yeah, until I figured out one day, I went, wait a second, whether you can throw a fireball or whether you can call on your iPhone and video clip your own, podcast or whatever, no matter what you do, at one point in time, you're still going to be the same human being you were 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. I really don't believe. I don't really think that maybe it was less stressful, the technology, but there was always something trying to kill us, right? Like a tiger or something, or, But the right now, I think we've gotten to the point where and this is one of the big themes I developed quite a bit in stories I'm writing lately. We've had this illusion over the last 200 years that we've won the battle against our planet. We've defeated nature.
But the planet will defeat us, so.
Yeah, we've moved beyond the cycle of life and death. Would say.
And now everything will be good and forever.
We've got
We are
this
safe
illusion
forever.
that we can go to Mars or we can go to the moon or something, and
we are almost as gods, God.
We don't need Earth anymore, kind of thing.
Yes.
And I think that's such a huge illusion because I don't think you can take man out of Earth. I don't think you can. I think wherever we go, we're still going to have to take our plants and our animals and our food sources and our.
We are part of it, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe ants and termites and all this. We're part of a biome, a biosphere.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is we've gotten very, very heady and very, very uppity, and we think we can.
And greedy,
yeah. Yeah, we are. We really think we've defeated. We're no longer agricultural. We're no longer making our own food. We're no longer all this stuff.
The automechanic, everything, and robotic and everything. It's Yeah,
and so I find it's easier to talk about those subjects if you use humor.
Yeah.
Often.
Yes.
So you create situations where someone's, it's funny because you can go. I like to create situations where, sure, you can go burn down this forest, but what are the implications, right? So what I'll do is I'll just create characters. I try to do this quite a bit. I did this a lot with my. Whenever I was writing for the demons and things, I like writing the demons. They were all very one-sided, and they were really one-sided. But in the end, you always try to create a character that, even if they're mean, and but they're mean in a likable way. So that makes it funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it funny.
And more lovable, likable.
Yeah, once you understood what's driving them, what's their motivation. I was particularly fond of one of the demons I created in Hero 6. I really like that whole kind of sidekick guy. And in any case, the dreams, he would have these dreams, and there was dreams about him being nice, and there was there were nightmares for him. And I remember that. But what's interesting about the situation is you realize that as long as you start painting pictures of people, because they're always parts of our own fears, right? Humor is just a way of saying, "Wow, I'm laughing because I'd never seen that perspective before." every joke works that way, right?
Yeah,
And you laugh because wait a second, the world's a bigger place than I thought it was. Right?
yeah.
Is this guy? Whoa, that's so. I didn't think of that. Oh, I should have seen it coming. You know, oh, wow, it's so funny. And the motion of humor is for me much more powerful than even a sadness or
Yes.
if you're using it to show
Well,
people the absurdity of their
good time.
situation. You know, it's absurd. It's like the English are quite good at it. The French are very funny. I know the Hungarians are very funny,
Yes.
and I've seen Romanians do that. You know, Polish are very funny too. Especially parts of the world where there's been a lot of war and trouble.
More funnier sometimes, yeah. Than
Yeah,
general.
you develop a very, very huge sense of cultural absurdity, and that's something I'm always fond of because you get people that are so not in agreement with each other
Yeah.
over something so ridiculously simple, and I love those situations. And I find in magical settings you can find them a lot more often because everything is so exaggerated.
Yeah.
People
That's the
have
case.
these huge powers. You know, they can call up an army of skeletons. They can call up an army of demons. They've got these huge powers, but in the end, they just want something. You know, they either want friendship or they want. Power is not an end game. Power is a means to an end. You know, that's what you find out. No matter how powerful your people, they always want something. They either want their father to love them, or they want this girl to fall in love with them, or this guy to admire them, or they want to get their child back, or there's always something. There's always something they want, and everything else is just a means to that end.
Or achieve it, yeah.
And particularly right now, you see a lot of it. Most of the characters that work well in today's society are women who want a more just society for women, right? Yes. So, and some of the most powerful, like the Hunger Games, I mean, that woman was that story is really good. This little hunter woman, but I find Handmaid's Tale is one of the best for that ever. You know, it's just like fantastic. I think over time we'll see video games starting to go that way too.
I hope.
Yeah, video games will give us situations where you have to. And if you should see Plague's Tale, it's the power doesn't come from her. The power of that the success of that game doesn't come from her power. It comes from her courage, right? It's her courage to confront all these rats and all these things. Right? It's amazing, and it becomes for her motivation because she's saving a child. Once you've understood that gut thing, it's kind of like The Last of Us, or all these really powerful stories. When the minute you realize that what I'm looking for as a player is to be put into the perspective of someone I can relate to, and I can just be driven through these changes that have to be made, in society or in their family or in their clan or whatever, and push them through to the end of it. It's just you get caught up in it. You can't stop. You can't stop. Because you're giving a chance. We're giving you a chance, and that's what we do when we craft as a writer. Our job is to give you something where you can go in there and you can
give a chance.
You're not going to hear our story. You're gonna help us tell that story, right?
And also live up, to that, and live true it, and also the help,
Yeah, it's so important.
And also one last question, that this year is the 25th anniversary of Heroes of Might and Magic. There will be some concerts or announcements or something you maybe heard about, or maybe in September, I think I'm
going to be following it to see what happens. I'm not really working with Ubisoft that much. I'm working with so I don't have all the information.
Because I heard it's a sad thing, but there was an interview 2 years ago in summer with Erwan, the Breton, on the fan page. I don't know now the exact name, and he said that Ashan will be destroyed. Sadly, there will be a new Heroes or Might and Magic game, and there will be a new world reboot, or I don't know now, but maybe Ashan will disappear. It's a sad thing, but we will see.
Yeah, I think it's right now. I know the IP is still being developed by Ubisoft in China. There's a lot of
And also, I
centralizing-
heard that it's just maybe a gossip, but I heard that John Van Kanagam, the main and bass guy, who made all the way the beginning, the start, worked again in China. I think in the IP, so it's a good news.
It's a big news. I think what's fantastic is that there was always something, and there always will be something magic about might and magic.
Yes.
I think it's even in the name of the series, it's the idea of they're not opposites. Even though in the game you either play might or you play magic, right?
Yeah, and also the bad guys are not really a bad guy, and then
there's something about might and magic. The idea, though, the concept was really cool. It basically said to you, and I think that's what when we say the 25 years of it, why it worked so well. There were two ways to solve a problem in this world: use magic or use might.
Yeah.
And it was funny because, but in any case, you're going to go to war.
Sadly, yeah.
There's no way you're going to take an army and go to war. And some of these armies are going to have a wizard, fighting, and some of these armies are going to have a general or a pilot or a knight or a thief or whatever. But what I found interesting about it was, in the end, it was might and magic, because you had might and you had magic on the back.
You had the possibilities, as well.
Yeah, and they weren't opposites; they were just a combination of things. And I think if you look at it, that's what was successful about might and magic. It's just that in life, you need to be courageous and strong.
Yeah, not just power. You need some magic in love or something like that.
Yeah, but you need a little bit of magic.
Yes.
If you don't have imagination or you give up optimism, whatever, or
creativity.
And what's I think really, really, really fascinating about might and magic is those two things are probably the things we have the least of in modern society. We've gotten rid of the need for brawn and for might and strength. Well, if you don't count nuclear weapons and and AK-47s, but we don't have might in our daily life. You don't go outside and beat up somebody, if they don't say hi to you, anymore, right? You don't, and we definitely don't have magic anymore, right? We have technology. We have that probably appears like magic.
Yeah. There was a game about this technology versus magic.
Totally.
The strategy that I don't know now. Yes.
And might was more diplomacy versus might, or I would say administration versus might. Organization versus might. So magic comes out, and it's been around for 30 years or whatever. How many years now? It's been 35.
25 now.
35. Yeah, it's like so. What was interesting about might and magic was, and this is true about any fantasy world. I mean, if you want to, this is one way of looking at it for me anyway. Science fiction is about possible futures for humanity. The mistakes we can make, the things we could maybe not make, right, and build better worlds and that kind of thing. Where fantasy was always about something we've lost and we're trying to find again. It's nostalgic fantasy. It's like there was a time, once upon a time, there used to be Merlin and Arthur. And
Star Wars began that way too.
Totally. Star Wars is fantasy. It's not science fiction.
Yeah.
Long ago.
Many people think that it's sci-fi, but no.
It's not a science fiction. It's not like Star Trek. It's not like even Battlestar Galactica. They don't try to explain to you why they're robots. They're just characters in a world, right? Even the Mandalorian is nothing at all science fiction. It's a Japanese knight kind of thing, right? It's nostalgic.
Well, and tale-like, almost like a tale.
And so I think that's as human beings, we want to think about it. And I think whether might and magic's developed by us or by Ubisoft's team or a different team or Ashen, it just goes back in the same past as the other worlds of might and magic. It doesn't really matter, because I think the one thing that might and magic will always be willing to do and help us do is remember a time when your courage and your imagination were necessary. And as long as you can solve any problem if you have a little bit of courage and a little bit of imagination. And you don't have to. And I think that's what Might and Magic. That's the reason we like it so much. Is these guys just went out there, grabbed an army, and solved their problems in the battlefield. But and then they would always come up with these clever things. And we do long for a time when you could mine for crystals and mercury, rather than just coal,
The fans love the resources also, They really missed it from Hero 6, the resources. So sometimes little parts can give up, feelings in hearts of the fans. So like resources.
I fought to keep sulfur. I fought in mercury, but I lost that battle. But that's, I think, part of the reason too was what we realized was. And then I realize this more now. We understand it more. We understand the mechanisms of Might and Magic more now than we used to. All those little things like mercury, sulfur, crystals, gems, all these different things you could find in the world, and all the artifacts, all the different grails, all the stuff you could find in the worlds were.
And the adventure, the feeling of the adventure.
Yeah, basically it's the key to emergent genre.
Yes.
Emergence when the story starts being written in your head. So that. And there needs to be a logic. You can't just be like. And I was never a fan of the leprechauns and the white tigers.
Oh yeah, in the Heroes 4. Yeah.
That always bothered me because they didn't explain it and it didn't make any sense. But
maybe they were put from the folklore.
I understood there was something about folklore. I understand there being a diversity, but it just didn't. And I was maybe too conservative. I should have embraced it. But in the end, and I didn't like it when they started putting tech. Like robots and stuff.
Yeah, they almost put a tech faction in.
I didn't like that. Even though there was a time when everybody loved that, but I was always kind of a purist.
This Dragon Knights you talk about, the faction Dragon Knights. It would be. You can tell something about it maybe because it wasn't in.
There's always something to develop. We had tons of stuff to do. We were ready to go, but and there were other games we're working on. We put Dragon Knights in some of our games. But they were like...
Yes, Julian told that more games were developed.
Yeah, there was a DS game, Clash of Heroes, that had Dragon Knights in it, which was a lot of fun. But we never got to develop the faction in the Heroes series. But what I found to be really cool was what I find about Might and Magic as a franchise, as an IP, it's intellectual property. Whatever. What I find about it was it basically summed up fantasy. Whether it be Tolkien, whether it be Game of Thrones, whether it be... It's this idea, hey, there's something we've forgotten. The old gods versus the new gods. There's something that we've left behind us and we've forgotten.
That's a good idea. There was a series, the American Gods in a novel,
American Gods, totally. American Gods is total fantasy brought to modern day, right?
Yes. The old one and the new ones.
You understand that. I think part of what we're doing is part of what we're trying to understand. There's a book right now, a very popular book called *Sapiens*, but it's this basic idea. I don't know whether God created us or we created God. It's like the big question, right? But I'm a Christian and I'm a firm believer in a higher power, right?
Of course.
But I do know we are very good at creating gods.
Yes.
And we're very good at it, and we've been doing it for 150,000 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we create these Jungian archetypes of what we're supposed to be, and some of these gods really helped us, and some of these gods really hurt us, right? But they were whether call them legends or paragons or call them whatever you want. These references we created, these gods which should aspire to become, could be both. They could be loving, they could be caring, they could be Thor, Loki, they could be Hercules, they could be whatever. All these things we created over the last 150,000 years, and I'm sure in Hungarian folklore there's just
there are some maybe not gods, but typical similar things. And also some magicians, Hungarian magicians, I think.
If you read Vladimir Prop, or Prop, he's a fairy tale analysis of Russia or and what you realize is over the years we just keep creating these legends and these stories, and right now we're living a time where we've kind of cut ourselves off with this past. And we're building brand new American gods like there's.
Yes.
And I think like Neil Gaiman would say, but what you can do if you understand the mechanism, you can, if you realize that these gods or these archetypes or things are just they're creations and constructs that are powerful and can help you become a magician, in your own life, whatever. But it's not just the power to throw a fireball; it's the power to believe that you can do anything you want.
Or or some people want to reach the God's status,
Totally. I find it absolutely. You want to become, but whether you're a Nietzschean, Nietzsche philosophy, the Ubermensch and all that.
Oh yes.
Or you can become your own Uber person, Uber guy, whatever. I think what's
empowering. Yes.
And this is why you answer your question about Might and Magic. There will always be. I don't think Might and Magic's going anywhere. It's been 30 years, so it'll be remade, it'll be rehashed. It'll come back. It'll go away.
Of course, maybe this year we'll see.
Yeah, it's just because it actually did something that very few IPs have been able to do. It just captured the very essence of why fantasy is interesting. You could have called it the days of Might and Magic, and it would have been the same. It would have been the same world. The days when we solved problems with a sword or with a wand.
Yes. Or tricky way, you can use magic for tricks. Maybe sometimes, teleporting, something like that. So sometimes not just damaging. Sometimes you can use it for tricks or empowering or something like that. So
totally.
Tricks,
You try to put those situations where you could your job was to defend. So basically, in my magic, either defending against these bad guys or you're attacking them. Right? But in the wars were it's quite tragic, I found. But the more and more, what I realize is. Humanity strives for peace, right? Yeah. But occasionally, when things get stagnant, or the sclerosis enters into a society,
sometimes from a great peace war, maybe in the near future can come. Whoever who do something, who not so.
Yeah, before a bunch of guys running out and beating each other up was a war, right? Now today. It's like you send biological weapons and you kill 1 million people, right? It's just our technology has become so brutal and so terrible that we're entering an age where we need magic again, right? And some people would say it's internet, and it's
need to believe again in magic. Yeah.
I still think Trump and Putin are the greatest chaos wizards of the world right now. Because they can throw spells and they can get you to believe anything you want to believe.
There was a song, from Queen, Magic,
Yeah.
So it's
exactly that.
really important.
I think we're entering an age now where technology is becoming magic.
Yes. Sometimes.
Whether you're a hacker, or whether you're a politician, or whether you're
there was a series about refreshing the old tale, of I wanted to. Oz, in a way that Oz has the power of mechanics and machinery, and beneath that there are the witches who have magic power. So between that, it's a great risk, which will be higher power or not, the technology or the magic. So.
Yeah, the illusion or the
illusion. Yes. So that Dragon Knight faction would consider some unique abilities and creatures, or which was.
I think what we did, we were cheating a little bit because it was more like the Beastmen factions that we had, the orcs and things like that. They were more. They were very.
But little bit, it's a little soldier-like, it's a little bit,
Yeah, the way we'd imagine them, they were dragons. They had like all these dragons.
I see.
But they
dragon wings.
They could come from any faction.
I see.
So there are more heroes from all the factions.
So they're almost like a pact or a legion of fellowship of dragons or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you could call them. They were like they were the Dragon Knights, so they had a belief that
they live for the dragons and they serve
they looked for a world where all the factions could live. They were champions of diversity.
Oh, I see.
And so they could come from all the factions. They were and we didn't get to develop them, so I don't have much. I mean, we wrote a lot about them, the stories and things, but the idea was they became part of the lore, and they were the descendants of Saruman. They became the schools of Saruman, who was our mythic figure, that created the prison hell. Right? So they were descendants of that great magic.
It's quite great idea.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff in there.
And also there was a possible another faction. The city. What was it called? I talked about it with Julian. Also the city of maybe the I don't know now. Free city of freedom cities or something like that.
Yeah. The free cities.
Yeah, the free cities. Yeah. It was. Yeah.
Up in the north. Yeah, you could have exactly. That was kind of like the idea was saying, okay, we've got these very, very.
It was a nomadic or a caravan-like thing, yeah. It's a nomadic.
Yeah, almost like these racist factions, and then we had these. We wanted to create, ideas of liberated towns.
Yeah,
right?
yes.
More chaotic, kind of our Americas,
Yeah.
but I think what we realized, those free cities were fun, but it was just basically places where other kinds of games could happen.
Yes.
So, and that was always fun because you could have adventures, you could have to run around. Where it had been really hard to go into an academy, one of the academy cities, and just go in and
I think that there was a vote about the factions, and I think Academy was the first. So the fans liked it.
Academy is really the first because it was important, and of course.
Sadly, it wasn't in Hero 6, but yeah. But it's almost. I heard that they started it but couldn't finish it. So.
We put it in. I think we put it in Shades of Darkness, but we couldn't get it in 6. I guess the Hero 6 add-on. Was that?
Yes.
No, we didn't.
No, it's Dungeon.
We didn't do Academy. Yeah, we didn't do Academy.
It was Dungeon.
Yeah.
Yes.
We did the one with the genie. What was the genie? That was in 7, right? The genie.
Yeah. But Julian said that almost. What is it in 7? It could be almost in 6. So we got it back later. So.
Yeah. And I was so upset because we it was just like. There's just all kinds of transitions. It's funny because you want to just write these games forever, and then you realize that they have times, and then maybe I think the future of Might and Magic would be if someone would develop the IP as a TV series or a.
Yeah. We managed to talk about with the leader of the Hungarian fans, Attila, my Volodya and about TV series or a movie trilogy, because from Heroes 5 or 6 you can really easily make it from the campaign story. So
it's like, but it's there's always, you never know.
And after that, if they make a game, it will be more popular because of the series, So it was
It's like, I don't know. I really like The Witcher.
Yeah. It's made in Hungary. The first season, it's made in Hungary. It was really great.
Was it? Yeah, that's awesome. That's right. You were lucky.
The second, I think it's now in Great Britain. I think, but yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. I really liked it because it had
It has a more personal feeling beneath. You know the words, each parts in each episode more, but it has a more personal feeling with the 3 characters. So it was a really unique series, and also much more in each episode from the world, but maybe they will hence abridge it in the season 2, and we will know more about the world. So it was really great.
It was good. It was good. It was a fun series to watch. I thought they did a good job of doing their best to adapt, the books. And
I now just read it. Started to read it.
Yeah, they did a good job. I mean, I've met some people didn't like it because they're huge fans, and they did. I think they did some really interesting scenaristic work too, with the difference in time periods and things. They played with time very well. And it was I'd almost forgotten the story too. So yeah, I kind of rediscovered it watching the series.
Yeah, it's really great because the time parallel. It was not in the exact time phases, but until sixth episode, I think. You can manage the whole timeline, but it was really great.
Yeah, so then you didn't know what was converging, who's who, the flashbacks were mixed together with you.
It almost looked like a crime,
Yeah, it's cool.
Got the pieces.
It was pretty cool. I actually liked I liked the 3 characters. Or the 2, especially the ones that kind of drive the Witcher and the Wizard. I think that's something that's just
one of the wizard lady is from my hometown page. I made an interview with her.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant series. I really liked it.
So waiting for the
that's-
second
you never
season.
know. Maybe Might Magic will end up being a TV series someday. Maybe.
Yeah, it's a great idea. We talk about it with Attila because I think it's a word you can use it really well for a series, but maybe from a perspective, from a hero, or a perspective from a faction or something like that. So it's really great because there are many characters who are really famous now. From the heroes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Solmir, etc. So there are many type of characters who can make
Believe
it.
me, it would be a fascinating and difficult job to figure out which story to tell.
But I wish good luck for it to come to reality later. We will see. So thank you for the talking and thank you for the seeing for the fans and for
great.
the watchers. And I hope you have a really great future on many halves, many sides of writing for video games or TV series or comic books. I hope I will heard about great news for your
I
career.
hope so too. Well, keep in touch, Andras. It was great. Thank you so much for talking about the stuff I love.
Oh, and me too, for pleasure. and also have a really great weekend evening for tonight.
All right, you too.
And,
Okay.
and have good stories for later.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for the
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There are men who fear legends, but a man legends fear. He's a four-hosted reaper, crying bullets for tears. When a drought comes, injustice